Before the cockerel crows, you will deny me, Peter, Jesus said. No, I'll never do that, Peter answered. Maundy, Thursday, the night before Jesus died. You'll all fall away, Jesus said. One of you will betray me, and Peter, you'll deny me. It's strange, we're often unaware of our weaknesses at times, aren't we? Sometimes, like Peter, we think we're stronger than we are. Yes, Peter did have his failures, there's no doubt about that, but he also had strength too, because he recovered from this failure. Judas didn't. Why was that? Tonight, we look at a trail of two men's tears. And we can learn a lot from Peter, particularly how to recover from our own fears and failures and receive everything that God has for us.
The reading is from Matthew chapter 26, verse 14, 20 through 25, and 31 through 35. Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." Then Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters because of me this night, for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Though all become deserters because of you, I will never desert you." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples.
Maundy, Thursday, the day before Jesus died. So much happens on Maundy, Thursday. You know, we often think of Easter as Palm Sunday and then Easter Sunday. So much happens in the days before Jesus dies on Friday and is resurrected on Sunday, especially Thursday. Thursday's a fascinating day. Maundy, Thursday comes from the old word mandate. It was Jesus' last commandment to his disciples: go love one another as I have loved you. That's the mandate. Learn how to love. That's the mandate. Tonight, I want to contrast Peter with Judas. And the reason that I am always fascinated by these two men is because they both fail miserably. They are the worst thing that could happen happened to them, both. And they compromised everything they knew to be true. And yet one recovers and one doesn't. Why is that? That's fascinating to me, that some people can learn from their sins and their failures and their weaknesses and go on to do amazingly great things. That would be Peter. And others, nothing. They never, ever recover. Why is that? Well, first of all, I want to just give you a little bit background here. It is Thursday night. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's with his disciples. They're celebrating Passover. Passover was a common annual celebration. So this would happen every year, just like us with Christmas. Happens every year. You gather with your friends, you gather with your family, and you would celebrate. So Jesus is gathered and he's with his disciples, and they're having their Passover meal together. Now, the mood would have been possibly a bit tense because Jesus has been talking to his disciples about time is short. He feels his enemies closing in on him. He senses that his death is near. He's sitting around the Passover table with his disciples. They're all there. Judas is there, Peter's there. And he says to them while they're eating, you know, you're all going to fail me. And they're kind of taken aback. He said, Peter, you'll deny me 3 times before the morning. Before the cockerel crows, you'll deny me. And Peter said, I would never, ever do that. Never. And Jesus went on to say, and one of you here will betray me. And they all start to ask, well, is it me? Is it who, you know, who's going to betray him? Jesus said, the one that I take this bread and give it to is going to betray me. And he gives it to Judas, who took the bread and left. No doubt because of guilt, because what Judas had done was he had decided beforehand, this is like a premeditated plan. He said to Jesus' enemies, I will give you the location of Jesus at just the right time if you pay me 30 pieces of silver. He had been paid that money. This is all happening on Thursday night. Later on in the evening, Jesus is arrested. They all flee for their lives, of course. Peter's standing around a charcoal fire, and a servant girl says to him, weren't you with Jesus of Nazareth? Aren't you one of his? No, he says, I don't know him. He's frightened, obviously. He doesn't want to be arrested himself, right? So he's scared. This happened 3 times. Someone else said, hey, aren't you with that Jesus of No, he says, I don't know. I have nothing to do with him. I don't know him. The 3rd time it happens, the cockerel crows. And the text tells us that Peter remembered and wept bitterly. So there you have that great remorse, you know. Interestingly enough, though, Judas felt the same way. Judas, after he received the money, tried to give the 30 pieces of silver back. So both men are sort of caught. They make this terrible error. Peter he's led by fear. He makes this terrible error. And then he's just stuck in this place of fear and grief. Judas, the same thing. He wants to give the 30 pieces back. Well, of course, you can't really undo things once you've done them, right? You can't really undo it. So these 2 men failed miserably. They're both caught in their weakness. It's a different kind of weakness. I think Peter is reactionary and he responds to his fear. I think Judas is possibly motivated by greed. Maybe some other things there, but it looks like it's a money thing and it's a greed thing. They carry through with their plan, or Judas carries through with his plan, and then he immediately regrets it. 2 men failed, radically different ends to the 2 men's lives. Why is that? Forgiveness was there for both men, but only one man, only Peter, found the comfort and the strength to move on and get his life back. Why is that? Why is that? Such a radically different outcome for these 2 people. And I think that's a really interesting question for us, because it seems to me that it has potential to show us a lot about ourselves. I mean, you'll know people like this. You'll know people who are completely defined by some tragedy or some weakness or some horrible upbringing that they had, or they never seem to get beyond it. You know, they never seem to get over it. And then someone else has a difficult childhood or a rough beginning or a trauma of various kinds, and they sort of rise above it and get stronger and move beyond it. Why is that? You know, what is that about? Some people can be defined by their failures in the past. Other people move on. You know, when I think about Judas and I think about Peter, it seems to me that the only difference between these two men is basically Judas can't conceive it would ever be possible to be forgiven and restored. Judas could never ever imagine that Jesus would once again call him friend, even though he's been with him 3 years. He's heard the teaching of Jesus. Forever forgive is Jesus' teaching. There's never a time not to forgive. He's seen him forgive time and time again. On the cross, even Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Thursday night round the table, he calls him friend. I think that Judas couldn't imagine he could ever, ever be forgiven. And so he listened to that voice in his head that must have told him he was beyond help, which of course led to the taking of his own life. Peter, on the other hand, different outcome. After Easter, Jesus went toward Peter, met him. There's an amazing text that speaks about, well, it's really a restoration. It's a beautiful text where Jesus meets Peter and says, Peter, you're still the one. You're still the leader. Take care of the sheep. Take care of the people. Take care of the church. Peter, do you love me? You're still the one. Take care of the sheep. Take care of the people. You're still the leader. 3 times Jesus said, do you love me? Yes, he says, I do, I do. Go on then. Do what you're called to do. Leave the past behind. Move on. The difference between Judas and Peter is I think that Peter received the undeserved forgiveness. It has to be undeserved, you see, because if we think that our forgiveness is deserved, we would never know when we had done enough to deserve it. In other words, we would always be stuck. We would always be carrying guilt. We would always feel like we didn't fit in and belong and be a part of Jesus' group. We would never feel like we had done enough. So forgiveness by its very nature has to always be undeserved forgiveness. Did Judas deserve forgiveness? No. Did Peter deserve it? No. But it's the nature of Jesus, you see. It's the nature of God to forgive. It's who God is. You know, God cannot not forgive. It's who God is. And Peter listened to what Jesus said was true about him rather than what he thought was true about him. Now, we don't know for sure what Peter thought about himself after he denied Jesus, but we have a good idea, right? Because we're human and we know what it feels like when we go against everything that's true and dear to us, right? When we've compromised our values, we understand, we know that. So we know that Peter must have felt an absolute failure, unable to move ahead, unable to be the leader of the early church, unable to teach, unable to pastor, unable to do all these things. How could he possibly lead, right? And yet Jesus came along and restored him, and he received that word. He received that word of affirmation. It's like, you're forgiven. Now move on. You're forgiven. You're restored. Now move on. And he did. That's the amazing thing about Peter. He received it. He said yes to it. And he went on to do amazing things. Now, he might have had, obviously, he was cowardly on the Thursday night, but he went on to do amazing things. You never really hear of Peter being cowardly after that. I'm sure he was frightened again. I'm sure he was tempted toward all sorts of things and be scared again. But somehow, with the strength of God and learning from his past mistake, and not doing it again, he went on to be an amazingly strong, brave, courageous leader. He was not defined by his past mistakes. I think that this Holy Week, Maundy Thursday, is a wonderful time to pause and reflect and receive forgiveness if we have that burden, if we have that sense that there's something from our past that's defining us, that's pulling us back. Holy Week is a wonderful time to receive full forgiveness, everything that God has for us. That's the heart cry. That's the prayer, that God would help us to take everything that God has for us. You know, the Spirit always moves us toward deeper freedoms. We're always, if you ever wonder, you know, where is God leading or what is God saying? It's always a movement toward freedom. I'm talking about inner freedom, you know, where you're not tied up with guilt, where you're not tied up with regret, when you're not thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't. You know, it's an ability to leave all that behind and move into the future with confidence, with the Spirit's help. There's the heart cry. God, help us to be like Peter and to take everything that you have for us, complete forgiveness and restoration because of the cross. Amen. say